Cover Killer Nation with you guys once again for yet another album review, and it's another album review of a release right here in 2011. This one just was released about a week or so ago in the middle of the month, and that is The Great Mass by the band Septicflesh. Now, Septicflesh is a band that had been active ever since the year 1990, however, had broken up and released their, what many people call their re-debut, back in 2008 entitled Communion. Great Mass is their second album since their breakup. Now, this is an album that many have heralded as potentially the album of the year here in 2011. It's one of these albums that have gotten such significant hype that anything less than classic was almost, well, unacceptable. And well, this 10-track, 43-minute-long affair definitely did not disappoint a lot of people, especially how the general reaction has been. But that is not my job. My job is to review what I thought about this particular album and reflect that upon you and see if I agree with these masses. Well, this is definitely an album about variety. This is an album where variety is not going to necessarily come with each and every track being done in a different style, but instead the different styles that you get within each individual track. You have the absolute bulldozing riffs of the death metal side of this particular band. You have the symphonic elements of this band that make it seem like a film score. You have soprano vocals. You have expert production by Peter from Hypocrisy. Every one of these tracks make you feel like you're not listening to an album of music, but rather you're watching a movie. And the words that you hear, the lyrics in the songs, is the sonic sermon that's being reflected upon you by Septicflesh, and it's done so in a very unique format where you get all of the brutality of these this particular Greek metal outfits outpouring, and then you also get that sort of softer, that little, you know, more simmered down side whenever they're trying to build a mood. And that's something that's done with this particular album, with a lot of traditional death metal, with a lot of death metal that you hear. You don't necessarily hear the words building a mood very often. Instead, it's something where it is exhibited mainly with the pulverizing, bulldozer, steamroller riffs that literally just bowl you over, and they just don't stop pummeling you until the record is through. Septicflesh takes a little bit of a different trek whenever they decide to do this. Instead, they decide to build an atmosphere. They're not afraid to tone it down a little bit. They're not afraid to take it slow, and then whenever the pulverizing riffs hit, whenever it accelerates and goes into a crescendo, it hits you even harder. That's exactly what happens here. Instead of it just being one long pulverizing trip, instead it's something where it builds and builds, and then bam! Almost like you don't see it coming, even though you kind of do. The variety on this album is definitely something that brings the score up. The production on this album only makes it soar even higher. Peter from Hypocrisy has always been known as a terrific sonic engineer. One of these guys that really knows how to create the atmosphere that the band itself has created through the music and make it sound even better. And that is exactly what has happened here with The Great Mass. It is just something that, with some tracks, you almost have to listen to it again to fully get it, to fully understand it. You can't wrap your head around it. It's just such a real divergence from what you're really used to. And that's what makes this album so classic, because it's also not so much relatively groundbreaking, but however, for a lot of people that are going to be sampling this style for the first time, they're not going to know how to react. They're not going to know what to do. For those who are used to it, for those that know that this is the modus operandi for this particular band, especially after Communion from 2008, they're going to see this as almost like a compilation of every single album from their career. Not to mention something that only can promise even higher mountains for them to scale, and to scale successfully. This is a fantastic record. This is a record that is well worth the accolades that were given to it prior to its release, and now after its release. And now I implore you to check it out for yourself. I give this one a nice, strong 8.75 out of 10. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing this album again in about December. And I think you know exactly what I mean by that.